Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another incredible episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sherianna. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah. I know we were just reminiscing before hitting record that we met way back when I was co-hosting the Quit Sugar Summit and you were a part of that. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to get you on the podcast because I know that you're in a very similar space with a lot of what I talk about with my clients and the deep emotional work that we need to do to really live our best lives, right? This isn't just about sugar and food. So I'm so grateful and excited for this conversation that we're going to have today. And I know my audience is really going to love your approach and the way that you really have this conversation, very different than I do. So before we get into all of that, and before I start asking you all these amazing questions that I can't wait to dive into, I think let's start with your story here. I know a lot of my audience might be new to you or not know who Sherianna Boyle is yet, and would love to hear a little bit of your backstory and what really got you into the work that you're doing and all these amazing books that you've written, and obviously the incredible healing work that you're doing in the world. What's your story?
Well, it's been a long journey. I've been in the field of mental health for over 20 years. So that's actually what I got trained in school to do. Unlike some other people, they sort of fell into it. I've always known that. So I've been in the field, like I said, of mental health. I've been teaching. I teach psychology at a local college. I was a former school psychologist for many years. I left that position because I had children of my own, totally intended to go back. And then during my maternity leave, just started writing about, okay, if I go back, how's it going to look different? Because I can't do what I did and now have a baby in my life. So it was like kind of like rewriting my own script, which ended up turning into my first book, which I self-published, which was for educators. And lo and behold, someone I knew that I had written a book, and I didn't know that they worked for a publishing company. And they said, "You're really into mindfulness." I said, "Yeah, and you know a lot about that. We need a book for parents, for children on anxiety. Would you be open to that?" And I said, "Sure." So they handed me an assignment and they told me you have 5 weeks to write it.
Wow.
And I said, okay, but mind you, I'm coming from the very fast track school psych world where we write reports like hotcakes and have caseloads that are exploding. So I was up for the challenge. And so I did. I wrote it in 5 weeks and they were so happy with what I wrote. They were like, "Can you do another one?" And I said, "Sure. Now what do you want me to write about?" So that's how I sort of entered into the traditional publishing world. And I did. So now here I am 10 books later, and I totally made a career change.
Wow. That's such a fun story. What a cool way to just kind of fall into it. Having people come to you being like, "Write me this book," and 5 weeks. That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize you had 10 books. I knew, I'm familiar with many of your books, but 10, that is absolutely incredible. And I know you just launched a new one, which we're going to dive into and talk about today for sure. And thank you for sharing a little bit. I think that's really fascinating. And I'm actually curious, when did you know, or actually like, how did you know that you wanted to get into the field of mental health, right? It sounds like you've studied that, maybe psychology. Like, was that something that you always knew from childhood? Or like, where did that spark originate for you?
It was something in college, I was just lucky. I just fell in love with the psychology classes, and I looked forward to them. I was inspired. I've always been someone, I was reading Marianne Williams, her book, Return to Love, which it has been put out again. But I mean, I read that way back when I was 17. It was one of my first self-help books. And so I've always been interested heavily in this field. I particularly loved authors from Sounds True, which is interesting because my latest book was published by Sounds True. So I almost think I was manifesting when I was back at 17 years old, not realizing I just had a thing. Because they had a catalog back then. So you would get the catalog that would come to your home that would have all the latest books. Now it's different. And I just remember sitting on that couch with my mom and reading it like a book and studying these authors and really just being inspired by them. Maybe perhaps the way someone gets inspired by music or art or cooking or something. I just have always had a love for books. So I think it's just always been with me, Danny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. It's obviously your purpose here, right? Coming through. It's like I've just always known, or I've always like had that drive. And I think it's really incredible and inspiring that you've followed that. I think there's so many people and a lot of my listeners, right, who aren't following that, right? Like we're stuck in dead-end jobs or
I think they're not, but perhaps you just don't know. I mean, it might not happen right away. That's what happens with manifesting, right? I mean, that was how long ago? And here I am with Sounds True. So it took many, many years and a lot of practice getting there. But I got there. And if you take off those attachments to outcome, you might discover that you are on the path.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is absolutely true. So before we get into that, and you're touching on some conversations that I really want to dive further into, I think it would be really great to have you share your definition of emotions. Like, what are emotions? And we talk a lot about emotions. You mentioned anxiety earlier. Like, what are emotions? And also, what does it mean to do an emotional detox? You know, I know you talk a lot about that as well.
So the way I see emotions is energy, which many people describe them as energy, molecules and atoms in motion, and vibration. And the emotions have anatomy, a physical anatomy, where they affect your body and your brain. They are actually very much like what's called neuropeptides, which are very similar to neurotransmitters. So they affect your cellular turnover, they affect the levels of inflammation in the body, and they affect the nitric oxide levels, which is a molecule of the ear, which helps with the circulation in the body. So there is a biochemical part to emotions. And then you go over to the other side of emotions, which I also love, and that is the sort of what you can't see. And that is where we talk about energy lines and we talk about meridians and nadis in the body. And so you have this nice blend of sort of Western and Eastern viewpoints of emotions. And I think they're brilliant. They're amazing because they do cross those lines. You know, we can experience them. We might be able to see them, but we definitely can feel how they impact the body. So that's how I see emotions: energy in motion, physical, non-physical impact on the body, and also connecting you to the infinite. Yeah. So there's the finite, which is the physical, and then where we have time and measurement and all of that. And then we have the infinite, which for me, emotions are very much connected to the soul. So when you process them, you discover yourself as a spiritual being. And what is that like? And what is that viewpoint like? And how does that impact the way I respond to things that are occurring here on earth and in my life?
Yeah. Yeah, I very much had a similar experience with that. The more that I've worked on my own sort of emotional awakening, or whatever we want to call it, right? Honoring and processing my emotions, the more I've opened up to that spiritual side of me. And it's been really, really potent. I'm grateful that you mentioned that physical piece and the actual research. For those of you who are listening and need the sciencey part, right? There is very physical things that happen in our body when we're feeling various emotions, whether it's, high vibration, love, happiness, or low vibration, grief, shame, anger. And, being on that sort of roller coaster, I think that's really important for people to understand. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It's not just the woo-woo stuff and the stuff we can't see and the mental effects. It's actually physically affecting our body. I actually have some people in my network that I personally know who have been trying for years to lose weight, right? And this conversation as well around the trauma and our emotions that actually cause our body to hold on to weight. And as soon as they processed those emotions, as soon as they processed the stuff that needed to be processed, they lost the weight. So this is kind of a missing piece as well, I see. And I don't know if you've seen that or if that's in your books as well, around like when we can fully let go of all of that crap that's hanging on into our cells and our body, right? It allows our systems to, run efficiently, right? Our metabolism and fat burning processes. Have you seen that or heard stories about that?
Well, absolutely. And I think that's why your work is so important. I know you do both, but in terms of the food part, there's a huge connection because of our bodies. And I do think of emotions as similar to food in terms of how we digest. So when we process our emotions fully, if we restrict processing them, then it's kind of like undigested food in the body. Right. And I actually like to make clear, you asked me about emotional detox. So I've written 3 books on emotional detox. That's a whole nother story. That really came from my own personal emotional traumas. So I had been writing books for various topics, mainly anxiety and things like that. Emotional detox book series arrived because I was going through an emotional trauma, something that I didn't expect that would impact me and my family. And so at that point, I was researching emotions. I had gotten a lot of information about what happens to them in the body and looking at trauma, really. And then I was struck with this event in my life. And it really was hard for me to go to certain therapies, quite frankly, because I found that it felt like it was re-traumatizing. And I was too raw for that. You really have to find the right person. And I did. There's wonderful therapists out there. But to revisit something in my situation, and I've since met other people, was too tough on me. I couldn't do that. And so there was no way I was going to get to processing. So I knew enough before the event happened to be able to step away and say, this isn't going to work for me. But again, what I had to do during that, and this is how the emotional detox came to be, is I had to change my mindset, Danny. And I had to say to myself, okay, I'm going to make myself nutty if I sit here and go over every single emotion I'm feeling, because there's so many and it's too much. And then if I revisit them, forget it. I'm going down. I'm not going to be able to function. So I developed the emotional detox mindset, which means, number 1, all your emotions matter. Processing them matters more. That's my motto. That's what I tell people. Then I say, all your emotions are good. Good meaning valuable, so long as they're processed. And people have a hard time with that. What do you mean good? What do you mean shame's good? And I'm going to say it's the way I learned, because again, if I went through every damn emotion, it was going to take me the rest of my life. There were so many. Yep. And so I just said, all your emotions are good so long as they're processed. And then I had to add on another layer. And the third layer, well, actually, there's 2 more layers. The third layer is we're not getting rid of your emotions. And that's got to be clear with an emotional detox. You're not getting rid of them. You're getting to them.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
What you're releasing are reactions. So it's the stories, the narratives, everything. That's what you are getting rid of, so that you can actually process the emotion. So it's like saying to yourself, I no longer have to be occupied with, well, what is it? And when did it occur? And how long's it been around? And who went? I don't have to do that. I can just say to myself, okay, so a lot of our reactions are actually coping mechanisms. Food is one of them. Yeah. Right? Eating's one of them. Denial, that was a big one for me. I had to release denial. It was through denial and or pretending or people pleasing or ignoring or minimizing, controlling, managing, all of this stuff. Those are all reactions. Those aren't feelings.
Okay, so what you're saying, just so my audience can understand, because this is cool. I've never actually heard this before, that when you process and when with what you're doing and what you're saying is processing an emotion is not actually, you're not getting rid of an emotion from the body. You're getting rid of like maybe the energy behind it or the toxicity of it and the mental chatter and all the stories about it. Is that right?
Yes, the conditioning that which a lot of it hasn't been the way we cope. So very often we cope by numbing ourselves. A lot of those reactions dull the energy until you can't feel anymore. You do that enough times, sure, you're going to have trouble feeling. The challenge is, maybe you numb the pain a little bit because you believe that it's too much to feel and think about. But guess what else you numb? You numb joy, you numb connection, you numb love, you numb all of that. So the reactions are, it's a way to wrap your brain around. Of course, it's not for everybody. It's the way that I developed emotional detox, which people tell me it helps them a lot. There's other approaches, of course, to emotional processing, but emotional detox is a mindset. Then, of course, the question becomes, well, how do I process my emotions? So now
that was my next question.
And that's where I developed Cleanse, which is a 7-step process. It's mindful, where you start at the C and you end up at the E, and it takes about 10 minutes. And I guide you through the steps of processing an emotion without revisiting the stories.
Yeah. Okay. Can you share that with us? Are you open to sharing that?
Those steps. Yeah. So those steps, Cleanse, it ended up sort of being the foundation of my practice. It's what I do. So I've written about Cleanse. There's 3 emotional detox books, and then now in the latest, Energy in Action, which is all about manifesting. So I use the same system now to manifest, because it's about processing your emotions. You need it for everything, right? So this first step is called clear reactivity. And those, again, mindful tools, basically letting your body know it's safe. That's the purpose of step 1. We have to feel safe in our bodies, just like food, right? If you're upset, your food isn't, you're not going to digest food well. You're not going to take in the nutrients well. Same thing. Then L is called look inward. And that's where I teach people how to identify the emotion without revisiting the stories.
Yeah.
Lots of breathing in that one, okay?
Yes.
And then E is emit. That is where I wrote a book on mantras. So I knew mantra was going to be in there. I knew it because I did all the research, and I said to myself, I know it's going to be in the Cleanse. And so I have mantra in there. Now, mantras are wonderful for increasing vibration in the body. Right? They help us because you're depleted when you're stressed. You're depleted when you're in trauma. If you're eating a lot, you're probably depleted. You're probably don't have enough nutrition, quite frankly. And so then A is activate. And that's about, okay, now where are you heading? Right? So you're starting to turn that corner. And activate it contains a lot of mindful things like visualizations. And every cleanse I make a little different so it doesn't get boring. N is nourish, S is surrender, and E is ease. So there's 7 mindful steps there.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Okay. I had to write those down. So clear reactivity, look inward, emit, which is mantras, activate, nourish, surrender, and ease.
Oh, you're good.
Amazing.
Good
I had to write them down. I wrote them down. I was cheating, but I love that. That is
still good memory. Okay.
Yeah, so fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's where a lot of my clients and my listeners get stuck, is like in that processing technique, right? And in that, I think you're really touching on something important. I'm personally becoming a lot more trauma informed. I'm doing a lot more embodiment training myself, and my husband and I are both getting really into a lot of somatic therapy training and learning in there about the nervous system, and learning also about like you obviously had, a big event happen in your life that you weren't ready to go fully back into. And that's actually really what we're learning now when it comes to trauma, especially big T trauma or big things, right? We can't just dive right in the deep end and go there again. That is re-traumatizing. And I think you're touching on an important thing that I teach all my clients as well, is that we don't actually need to like relive a story. This is exactly what you're saying. I'm just saying it differently. Relive a story or go back into a trauma, because all that needs to happen is that emotion needs to be released from the body and from the nervous system. So we can go in and just feel that emotion or process it using this amazing cleanse protocol and release that from the body without needing to necessarily go back. Now, sometimes there might be a need for that, right? And obviously working with a trained professional to guide you there. And I'm so grateful that it sounded like you were aware enough to know who was your person, right? And what was your modality? Because there's also a million different modalities to help release trauma and to process emotions. So I really, love that you honored that and listened to your body, right? And what you needed. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the new book. I'm so excited to hear more about the new book. It's called Energy in Action. So the first question is, what does that mean?
Well, that's a good question, because it is how I define manifesting. And that was another thing that I had a hard time with after writing so much about emotions, and more importantly, processing emotions. I thought to myself, I'm having a really hard time aligning with many of the teachings around manifesting, because many of them teach you to change your thoughts, change your world. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting that they're encouraging you to change your thoughts, because here's what I have found, that when you process your emotions, your thoughts change automatically.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So why would I go to, that feels like a lot more work to me. It just didn't make any sense. I'm like, why am I going to sit here and say, okay, think this instead, do this instead, focus on this instead? That feels like effort. And so I just thought, interesting. So I started to explore the spiritual laws of the universe. So the energy in action is, again, energy in action is how I define manifesting. Manifesting is energy in action. Yeah. So it's your emotions and your intuition and flow.
Wow.
Your emotions are energy. Once that energy starts to move and increase in vibration, using the same cleanse, mind you, I didn't change the system on everyone so that once they get it, they can just expand it. And then what ends up happening is you start to really learn how to follow and trust your intuitive guidance. But also what happens in energy in action is I teach people how to download energy in the body, because a lot of people are still giving way too much, and there's not enough in the tank. Yeah. Because they just don't know how. So the laws teach us that. When I dove into the laws and looked at them from the lens of emotions, what I did was I showed people, okay, here's how you can go out of alignment with the laws. Here's a cleanse to bring you back in alignment. Mm-hmm. So if I speak to, say, the law of vibration, the law of vibration tells us that we're never stuck. That energy is always in motion and never rests. Therefore, this whole mentality that I'm stuck, even stuck in my weight, right, stuck in my life, stuck in my job. Once I start to bring that energy into action, process the emotions, elevate my intuition, I'm going to start to take in the energy. And I explain how to do that in the book. And all of a sudden I realize, oh my gosh, like that was all made up in my head.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't just think, I feel it. And that's the more important part, is you feel. And now that you are in this space of, oh my gosh, I have freedom, I have flexibility, I have options, I have choices, and I can feel it in my body. That's a really good time to think about what you want to manifest, as opposed to the reverse, when we're in a space of reactivity and we're like, okay, I just need to manifest something new. I got to manifest a new job. That's like coming from blocked emotions, is coming from reactions. So are you manifesting to manage your fear? Are you manifesting to manage your anxiety? Are you manifesting to control?
Right.
You have to
Right.
ask
Is it just
yourself that.
perpetuating one of those coping mechanisms, right?
Exactly. And what emotions are you not allowing to happen and putting it under the umbrella of I'm just going to just manifest for me. What the
Yeah.
heck does that mean? So it really is about, okay, there's something in me. And it's quite amazing. And I'm using it to really, I told you, you were like, how's the book going? I'm like, I think it's going great considering I'm putting very little investment into it. My
Yeah.
investment is my emotions. You know, I just look at it and I'm like, wow, you're doing pretty good out there in the world. And all I'm doing is what I teach.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is really fascinating. And I'm having sort of this visual because this, I mean, absolutely ties in with everything that I've learned and understand as well, is almost this like we have to switch as a society from this like mind down approach and tune into the body up approach, right? Like we know our mind and our body are connected, but we as a society spend so much time up here in our mind, right? Trying to change our thoughts, trying to willpower our way through whatever goal it is we're trying to manifest. And what you're saying is, no, we got to start with the emotional piece, right? Detox some of that, cleanse out some of these emotions. I kind of imagine, I'm a very visual person. I imagine like the cobwebs being cleared, right? So that you can drop into your intuition more, right? I know so many of my listeners feel so disconnected from their inner voice, from their true selves, really having no idea how to even connect with their body. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but the more we clear out those cobwebs, those emotions, right? The more you can actually hear your inner voice and hear your intuition. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying the more you put that energy into action, so the emotions, we want them to move, we clear out the reactions.
Okay.
And as we process the emotions, which is just energy, by the way, and the processing, when they get processed, they go up in vibration. So how do you know? That's the bigger question. How do you know when an emotion is in a processing state? You feel lighter, you feel calmer, you feel more grounded, you feel less attached, and you feel more hopeful. I mean, these are some of the responses that I get from people. And that is just as important, if not the most important. I think sometimes we miss is that, okay, well, how do you feel now?
Yeah.
What's it like now? And again, very often it will be, I feel calm, I feel relaxed, I feel peaceful. And then of course the next question is, well, how do I keep this?
Yeah.
How do I keep this going in my life? And people like the feeling. They're like, well, what happens when I get off the phone with you?
Right.
Or I'm sure that happens to you too, Danny.
Yeah.
What happens? Can I keep you on my shoulder like all day long, right? And it just takes practice. And that's what I love about Cleanse is that it's the same structure, because we do need, you probably found this in your coaching, people need structure.
Yeah.
It can't be too loosey-goosey. It can't be grab this here. And I've been teaching yoga for well over 20 years. And when I was in my trauma crisis, I went to yoga and I just about gave the yoga teacher the middle finger. I thought, this isn't going to work. I just literally, it was too airy-fairy for me. It was when you have, and collectively, we all just went through a trauma with COVID.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know that so a lot of good things came out from that, from COVID as well, but still, we didn't know what to expect for a really long time. Right. Yeah. So that's a collective trauma. And so this cleanse is consistent. And the more consistent you are with your structure, whether it's my structure or something that you're teaching, just be consistent, right? Yeah. Because otherwise you're all over the place and your body doesn't know what to trust. So whatever it is that you choose, just stick with it for a while and give yourself a chance to get acclimated so that your body gets a chance to actually, okay, I get what's happening here. And last time I did this, I felt relaxed and I felt open and I felt like I was healing. Oh, I guess I'll let her do it again or him do it again, whatever. So that consistency is very important.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I feel like we do live in a world now where it's just instant gratification left, right, and center, right? So when we talk about, and for those who've been listening to this show for a while, you know that we're not about quick fixes here. When we're doing this inner work and this inner healing, this does take that consistency, exactly like you're saying. And I know so many of you listening to this will try what Sherry-Anna's sharing or what I've talked about on the show. You'll try it a handful of times. Maybe you try it for a week and you don't feel any different or nothing changes. So you just give up. You're like, well, it doesn't work for me. Right. And I'm so glad that you're mentioning that, because we have to remember that these patterns and these stories have been going on for decades in our mind. Right. And our weight gain and whatever it is you're struggling with didn't just happen overnight. So this consistency that you mentioned is so powerful. And it's kind of that piece that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around. Like, they just want to feel better now, right? They want to have this all sorted out, be eating healthy, be no longer craving sugar, right? We just want to get her done. And the tough love is that it can't happen like that. This is a process, right? And that consistency is big. So how do you keep up that consistency when you're feeling maybe disheartened? Like, oh, I don't feel anything changing. I still feel anxious or stressed, or I'm still grieving, or like whatever, maybe there's a lower vibration, heavy emotion that's hard to kind of climb out of. Like, how do you stay in that consistency on the days where, and even maybe for you personally now, because you're human, you still have bad days, I'm sure, where like that might feel really hard to do?
Well, for me, it's the cleanse is it. And it's my go-to. And sometimes I always do it every day. I don't think I've ever missed a day of cleansing. So I have a set routine where the first thing I do in the morning, well, I get up, get my cup of coffee, of course, sit down, and then I go through a cleanse. The thing where I have to, Danny, work on is if something threw me that day. Perhaps there was some level of reactivity, or one of my kids was upset, or I started kind of going off. I got off track from something. That's where I need to harness and where I say, oh yeah, I can cleanse, right? And so I'll have to go back, and sometimes it happens like the next day. I'll say, oh yeah, I never did cleanse. I let that linger a little bit too long, or I let my mind get a little bit too involved for a little bit too. I lost some gas in the tank over it. And so learning to pause, like you would pull over the car, take a breath and ground yourself, or go outside, little things like that you learn can keep you going. And for me, again, remembering that, well, this might be something, I always say, what's coming up to be cleansed. So this might just be something coming up for me, because the spiritual laws teach us that. So a lot of what's happening outside of us is happening inside of us. And I had a client not too long ago who had a partner who the person was concerned about the partner's eating. Yeah. And what they're consuming and their health and their patterns. And then as we became cleansed, as we went through the process, we discovered that this was really a big, big control system in her family. So we're so focused on the partner and what are they eating and doing. And just because we're not eating and doing it that way doesn't mean we're not carrying the pattern. Mm-hmm. Same pattern, but this person was doing it differently. So it's the same control kind of pattern. There's a management pattern there, and it involved numbing. That's what I mean by numbing, back to where we were before. This person's numbing with food. The person who's saying they're worried about the person eating was also numbing, but they're numbing by just checking out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they're pretty good at it too. So you kind of learn through processing emotions, you learn, oh my gosh, I'm part of this. It's not separate. And the laws teach us that as well.
Yeah. 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 That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that example. That's so fascinating when we can start to really, I always encourage my clients to see everyone in our lives as mirrors, right? They're here to show us a pattern. So whenever we're complaining or judging or like looking at other people, right, that come into our lives, they're there for a reason to show us something or to teach us. So it's all about that sort of introspection of like, whoa, that person really upset me, or even your kids, right? Wow, that really triggered me earlier. Like, why? right? What's going on? And like you said, what is coming up that needs to be cleansed, right? What are the emotions that are being triggered here? And I want to come back to a while ago when you mentioned that like all emotions are important. I forget the exact words you used, right? But they're all good, right? You said good. I try not to use the term good or bad, but they're all important, right? They're all here to serve us in some way. And I remember years ago, I can't remember who came up with this analogy. Maybe you'll know. Maybe it was you, but this understanding that like on a daily basis, our emotions are actually our compass or guide. And I really loved this because it brought in the spiritual aspect of like, if every day, I'm feeling obviously outside of, unique situations, but if every day I'm feeling really stressed or really anxious or really tense, right? That's a sign that you're going in the wrong direction, that there's something out of alignment in your life, right? You're not going to be manifesting anything or listening to your intuition at that point. That was me in my old job. I used to work for a bank here in Canada, and it was absolutely misery. And I was miserable every day and at my low with emotional eating and all the things. And now I notice that if I'm in a pattern where I'm like feeling really low and there's not something like there's a reason for it, like somebody died and I'm actually grieving, so I'm feeling really low, that makes sense. But if it's just for no reason, that's, I really have to step back and think, what's out of alignment here? Like, where am I going in the wrong direction, right? If we're understanding that we're always being divinely guided, our emotional, home, we want that to be that joy, that peace, that presence, that freedom, that lightness, right? That everybody who's listening to this, I know you're on the search for this. And we're not always going to be there, but sort of that compass. Have you heard that before? Or have you ever like applied that or understood that?
I have definitely. And, I'm still processing a lot of that myself, Danny, and my perspective is always being refreshed by whatever I'm working on. And I think that what I've learned is when I get that anxiety feeling that you're talking about, right? That like, oh boy, is this the right way, the wrong way? Am I going to make a poor choice? Is this not good? Like, and you really don't know your compass. And I do agree, emotions are very much your compass, but it's just such a great time to give yourself permission to process what's coming up, to release the reactions around that, because we're always being guided to feel. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm learning in my experiences. Our body's always bringing us back to that. Every moment, it's like, okay, there's something to feel here. There's something I'm not allowing myself to feel. Because quite frankly, there were a lot of times in my life, Danny, where I had anxiety and I could look back and say, well, is that because I made the wrong choice or I should have listened to that? Or was that just the inner guidance system saying, you're not feeling, honey. And because you're not feeling, you're not getting the inner strength that you need to be able to move forward in the way that would serve you and the people around you in the best possible way. So I find when we don't feel, that's when we don't really nourish our self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-confidence. And as a result, we may find ourselves like not trusting what's coming our way.
Yeah. And not trusting ourselves and our bodies. I deal with a lot of this with my clients, right? There's like such lack of trust in our body, right? Years of abuse, mental, physical, eating, all of us have been there, right? Especially as women, I think. And like that emotional piece is so huge when we need to, like, as we feel more, like you said, we can trust more, right? We can trust ourselves more. I've noticed that in my own body, the more I'm not lying to myself, right? Almost not having the shield up, right? Really honoring, like, today there's some sadness here, or I'm feeling joy, or, all of it, right? Honoring all of it. I can start to really repair that relationship with myself. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's really beautiful. I want to come back to the theme of this podcast. Let's talk for a second about sugar. We haven't really done that. Yeah. But I'm curious because I know you have some thoughts around this, or I hope you have some thoughts around this. Like this Energy and action. So I love that term for manifesting. I'm a manifesting newbie, but I do understand a little bit about manifesting and how it really is just this high vibration energy or aligned energy in action, right? A lot of people sit around thinking manifesting is just sitting in meditation and dreaming of their dream house. And we need the action piece that a lot of people forget, which is why I'm putting this all together. I absolutely love the name of the book. So how can energy and action actually help people when it comes to sugar, reducing sugar cravings or, understanding that whole compulsion, numbing out, addictive behaviors that I know many of my listeners are really struggling with?
Well, do you have someone in mind that you would think of that we could kind of play with a little bit? I'm sure you have dozens of people that you could pull from. Danny,
Yeah.
do you have one specifically in mind? What is the narrative there? That trouble reducing cravings?
Yeah. So, okay, I've got one in mind. I won't name her.
Yes.
But yeah, this is someone who was in my last program and was really just struggling every single day at work to avoid like the convenient snacks and foods. So work was really stressful and she feels like she didn't have or doesn't have time in her days off to cook and meal prep. And she's really struggling with like, how do I eat healthy and avoid these snacks. So at work, every day was a real challenge for her to be healthy. And she would just live on convenience foods and snacks because there was a convenience store right around the corner. So it was kind of this constant thought of like, I need something to eat. I'm hungry. I need sugar.
Okay. So, and I work intuitively a lot, so I just pick up on the energy. But in terms of manifesting, because that's what you asked me. So the way energy and action works, again, it's the same cleanse. With this particular person, you start at the C and you end at the E. There's a spiritual law called the law of correspondence. And the law of correspondence reminds us that what's happening on the outside is happening on the inside, right? So although it's like the snacks and time and blah, 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 what I kind of sense and feel with this person, and by the way, this could be a billion people that you work with, so we don't want this person to think, don't assume it's you, is that,
No, this is a theme. This is not the only client that has
Exactly. So I think a good one to work with is the cleanses under the law of correspondence there. Mm-hmm. And what in particular is that very often when we say these things, we might have a belief that we're unsupported. Mm-hmm. Underlining all of that. So when I hear, well, there's snacks, and then, it feels, even though you're a wonderful support system, and I would encourage you and these clients that have a similar, is maybe even start there where you take a moment to actually process some of the good stuff too. So we don't just process emotions that are driving or processing, again, is releasing reactions so that you can process the emotions and you have a whole beautiful range of emotions. And the reality is you're there for this person, right? You're support.
Yeah.
Very much so. You've put together all these programs. And I think if anyone's working with you and listening to this, you want to process that, and when Danny shows up to support me, or when we have our sessions or whatever it is, it makes me feel.
Yeah. I want to pause you for a second because this is really fascinating. This client that I'm thinking of, because I didn't mention this to you and you're already picking up on this. So I want to bring this out. She is very much someone who feels alone and feels very unsupported. She lives internationally and doesn't have an in-person network of support, and especially in her struggles with sugar has felt very alone, and like she's the only one with that problem. And obviously this is slowly shifting as we're working together and with a group, and she's connected with the other clients. You can see she's not alone anymore, but that is, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, right? That's really
good. Well, that's what I was feeling right away, is she needs to really take in the support that she's getting now and fully receive that. because there might be a theme there. But the other thing is so every cleanse in energy and action corresponds with what's a ray of light. So I took the spiritual laws of the universe, there's 13, and 13 rays of light. Now, rays of light are vibrations that come from source or the God of your understanding, right? So they're pure unconditional love is the point. And when I was feeling this person, I was feeling that's actually the blue ray of light that I put with the law of correspondence, which is all about faith, protection, and trust. So I feel like this person could use a big dose of that, a big dose of the blue ray of light. Download that. And again, you have to learn how to really take energy into your body, because it's not always about what we're clearing. It's about what we need. And to me, it's that support thing is very painful, or was very painful. I know you've changed a lot of that, but that would be where I would guide her in energy and action, is to do the cleanses that correspond with the law of correspondence. And I would have her really take in that particular ray of light to really nourish herself and her soul again. Because sometimes these things come in from generations, and things come in from, if you believe in lifetimes. So it's a beautiful system, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from it in terms of people feeling, wow, this really, I can feel this light, and it's making me feel it's quite effortless the way it happens.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing about those rays of light. That's really, really beautiful. And yeah, all of what you're saying really makes a lot of sense when I'm thinking of this client for sure. And you teach that in your book, right? Just to be clear, before I've written how to download that.
How to download. I guide you through every single step. You don't have to figure it out with your brain. I try to keep your brain as quiet as possible. And there's 52 of them, and they're with every single law. And we all need this. I frequently have had to have that download myself. So I'm not saying like once you get the download, you're full and you move on. It's whatever's coming up. And then again, the universe knows what you need. Again, it's that inner strength. But this person, I feel like that support, that faith, that trust, and also protection. I'm sure you come across that a lot in your work, that we eat when we don't feel safe, or we don't feel loved, or we don't feel right. So that's why I think it's just a great addition to this kind of work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for kind of walking us through that. It's really cool to see you in process, in action. Cool to see you in action with this. And I really, really appreciate that. This has been incredible. I want to be mindful of your time and our listeners' time, and I could just chat with you forever. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your wisdom. Do you have any final thoughts, anything that's still burning that needs to be said here today before we wrap things up?
Nothing burning, Danny. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think people are probably digesting it at this point, and that's just as important, just to kind of take it in and maybe listen to it again if you need to.
Yeah, process. There's a lot to process here, a lot that Sherianna shared and we went through. Thank you so much again. Now, where can everybody come and find you and buy your most recent book, or one of the other 10 that you've written, and come and connect with you online?
Sure. It's SheriannaBoyle.com. And I also have the Energy in Action course, which is not really a course. I don't really like calling it a course, but I couldn't come up with another term, so I called it a course. But that's really just me guiding you through some downloads.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'll make sure all of your links are below. I know you've got a couple places where people can connect with you, come and buy the book, come reach out. And if you resonated with anything that Sherianna shared today, please go reach out to her, connect, definitely get the book, and come check out your podcast. Right, which I'm going to come on very soon.
Right, I can't wait. Excited.
Yes, excited. We're going to turn the tables. I can't wait. Yeah. Thank you again, Sherianna, for being here today. This was an awesome conversation, and everybody listening, I can't thank you enough for tuning into another episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning into another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.